So, wanted to talk a little bit about the first topic, which is builds. And so I think we've got a pretty diverse group of panelists here. If you see, we've got a national provider that's built network all across the country. We've got power generation and transmission company. We've also got a regional cooperative. So it's a pretty good mix as you guys look at your own network and how you expand. So the first thing we're going to talk about is build. And I guess, Randy, if we can start with you on the end from more of a national perspective. As you look at putting together a new build, what's the process that you go through?
When you think about new builds, I think our first step is always to think about how we can not build. So are there assets or things out there that we can leverage and take advantage of that don't require a build? They're expensive, cost a lot of money, and take a lot of time. So we're always trying to find the most cost-effective way to do it. So I think we spend a lot of time really working on the route, understanding what your requirements are, where you need to connect, and then what's the most optimal way to get from A to B. And I think, we focus on feasibility, the underlying rights, and you have the program rights and way to build it. It's really easy to draw lines on a map. People do it all the time. When you get out there and start building it, you find out there's a lot of gotchas that creep up on you. So I think spending a lot of time in the planning phase makes sure you understand rights of way, the underlying rights, and then any potential environmental or other impacts that could sneak up on you once you're in construction.
So, next, Donna, you've got a very different type of structure at TVA. And so I'm sure you have a very different type of process that you go through when you're looking at new builds. Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
So definitely from the TVA perspective, our network serves our internal in-house communications, relay SCADA, power system operations, IT corporate communications. So anything that we do with an external party definitely needs to fit an operational model for TVA. But we definitely try to be strategic with any of our builds to incorporate any, cities, facilities, drops that you're wanting along the network so that we can pair that partnership together that's mutually beneficial for both. We traditionally do an IRU agreement, and we don't really consider ourselves as a vendor. We don't do speculative builds for the most part. It definitely needs to be some type of mutual benefit from that operation, but we do build long-term relationships. And at this point have been very, successful building the network that we have and always looking for additional routes to expand our fiber footprint into other territories and different cities. Definitely have an interest in building with the rural broadband effort that's going on into the communities as well, being that middle mile, long haul provider.
Great, thank you. Michael, how does your process differ?
Well, we're a little bit different because we're building in a lot of cases to the end user. So if one of our members wants to reach an end user, then we're going to look at the ROI on that and the need of the member that we're going to be building for. We've got two members that are electric co-ops that'll take the builds on themselves. So if they decide they want to get to an end subscriber, they'll do the analysis of those builds. We've got one member who we handle all the builds for. So we have to look at the return on investment for those builds. We have to look at all the pre-engineering that needs to be done. We've got to look at, are we going to be building on a member's poles, or are we going to be going outside of the area where we're going to have to work with other power providers to get on their poles, or we need to go underground, overhead, based on all those scenarios that we're looking at. So there's quite a few different areas that we have to address when we're looking at building.
Gotcha. So let's jump to, I think, where the $64,000 question is. When you look at builds, do you have some rough order of magnitudes for cost for build? And I think it's very different for different types of companies and very different for different regions. Randy, you've got a lot of experience nationwide. Talk a little bit about some of the ranges.
I think they're pretty significant when you talk about the ranges for the type of builds we do. We do a lot of metro projects in big cities. We've got major FTT projects underway in Dallas, in the Bay Area, in Seattle, which all can be fairly expensive. And then we have like 4,000 miles of long haul construction underway through pretty fertile ground across Kansas and parts of Oklahoma where it's a lot cheaper. So there's a huge range that you see. And I think from an aerial perspective, when we're putting that in, I'd say maybe at the low end it's $5, but at the high end it can get up closer to $20. And when you see the higher end, it's usually driven by the make-ready. It depends on how clean the pole line is. So if you have really good, relatively new poles that are existing and attached to them, it should be quick to get access to it and fairly inexpensive to build. It's when you have to go through the make-ready process with the utility, where they've got to relocate, other providers have to relocate, they might have to move some power stuff can take a lot of time and a lot of money. From an underground perspective, I think it's a much broader range. It can be down in the lower, teens, $10 a foot, probably pretty cheap. It could be a little less in some areas, but depending on where you get to, up in your neck of the woods in Boston, I think we probably expect it to be closer to $100 a foot. So just really huge mix based on, are you plowing, are you boring, are you trenching, are you going through a downtown city, are you out plowing in the rural areas?
Gotcha. And so I guess give me an example of a $10 market. Meaning a place where you can construct underground for $10 a foot.
Well, I think we're building from Omaha all the way down to Dallas right now. So we're looking at some of that long haul sections across Nebraska and Kansas. We're in that range there.
Gotcha. Is that aerial or underground?
That's all underground. So when we're doing our long haul, we're really focused on 100% underground for our long haul projects because of the requirements of our end customers. People really focus on that. When we're looking at some of the metro and regional networks, those are look more aerial, what's most cost effective.
And so things like in the metro, where we see prices, Boston, you're saying $100, we see $200 a foot for underground construction. Old city, a lot of infrastructure. What about things like micro trench? You guys use some of those technologies?
We have not used micro trench at all, so we've avoided that. I think there's some potential there. We've talked about it, but we've not implemented that in what I call our production yet.
Gotcha. And concerns about just using the technology, or is it more just a different process?
Well, I think concerns about the longevity of it. It's great. Maybe sound good on the short term. Oh, we're going to do this. It makes sense. We're going to spread these ducts out, across the pavement. But we really have a lot of good research and data that says over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how well does that hold up to the traffic and to the other impacts in that area. Similar to microfiber and microduct and existing ones. We have done some of that. We've done a lot of trials and tests with microfiber in locations where we're constrained on existing conduits. But we haven't done a significant amount of new construction that is fully deploying microfiber and not using micro trenching. We just haven't found the right opportunity. I'm sure we will get there with the micro trenching, but it's that whole cost benefit analysis, and it hasn't taken in that direction that we're willing to take that risk.
And Michael, thoughts on cost in your area?
Well, we're building in a lot of our 95% of our fiber's aerial. So because we work with electric co-ops and a lot of distribution, we're able to get on their poles. So we get, if you're going to run aerial in a co-op's territory where we have good access to poles, we're probably closer to $12,000 a mile in those areas. But when we step outside those regions, we have to go through other power providers. I know when we work with one power provider, to have them look at a pole, it's $150 to come out and take a look at that pole. Say, oh yeah, here's what you need to do. That's just to have them take a look at the pole. Move the pole or change the pole out, there's $4,000 for that pole. And then so the price can vary tremendously based on who you're working with and the status of the pole that you're working on.
So Donna, as always, slightly different with TVA. And, I think one of the interesting things, we were talking about this yesterday, with TVA is a lot of middle mile fiber. When you're looking at generation and transmission, you've got existing rights of way that you can leverage. So I guess if we could talk a little bit about that, and not so much how much it would cost to construct for TVA, but if I'm a partner coming in to approach TVA to say, I want to build on your transmission lines, what does that look like?
Good question. One thing that definitely, again, sets us apart from others is in order for TVA to stay compliant with our right-of-ways and, the attachments is when we install optical ground wire, we don't do ADSS underbuild or anything like that. It's truly optical ground wire. So for those who may not be familiar, it's the ground wire positioned at the very top of the high voltage transmission tower that's there for lightning protection and other resources. So it's a dual purpose cable. It serves as lightning protection as well as has fiber optics through the center of the cable. It's not inexpensive to install, but regarding back to the right-of-ways, TVA is not going to go out and perfect additional right-of-way. We feel our current right-of-ways have the installation rights to install telecommunications for power system operations, and as a federal agency, we have the right to sell or license the surplus asset. So to stay in compliance, TVA has to own that cable. So working with us, we will work with you from a capital investment or a lease perspective, and then IRU your company back a certain quantity of fibers for that capital investment for a long-term arrangement.
So how does the maintenance work on that?
Maintenance, TVA is responsible for the maintenance of the cable. We have a vested interest since it's something that we use for our own power system operations. Maybe different from other utilities, but for us, it's a critical asset for TVA and power system operations. Power system will always take precedence in an outage, but at the same time, our telecommunication crews are going to be on site, ready to restore that telecommunication circuit for our own in-house communications, and then the external parties have the advantage of being turned up immediately thereafter. So we have a pretty stringent maintenance restoration policy regarding our own infrastructure, which then benefits an external party.
Gotcha. So the external party is not going to be responsible for any of the maintenance, obviously, up in the ground wire position.
Right. We have our own in-house crews. Usually how the connection will work with you is we have a splice point on the high voltage tower. We will bring it down the tower link to a demarc on the ground, and that's where the splice will occur. But anything related to touching that tower or the cable will be TVA responsibility and trained crews.
Probably safer that way. So I guess one of the other things that comes up when you're looking to get from point A to point B, right away. So public versus private right away, different types of right away, pros and cons. I think that's a big issue for a lot of folks. And Randy, we'll start with you if you don't mind.
Donna has a lot to say about right away. She works with lots of third parties. I'm teasing me. They have the benefit of having their own right away. So for us, I think it's fluctuated over time in the telecom industry, and there was back in the golden era, people were really big on the private right of way, specifically the railroads, and working with them and did a lot of projects there. Our view is for those who don't know, Zale, we're very frugal. We really look at cost-effective solutions. So we feel that we do a lot of analysis and look at things from a financial perspective. We don't do any speculative builds. Everything is success-based. So it's trying to figure out what's the revenue associated with it, how can we get the cost of it. So we really focus on public right-of-way because it's typically much less costly to get access to it. Sometimes it takes longer to build and you don't get as direct a route, but we feel, especially from the railroad perspective, they charge a lot of money up front, and then in exchange for that, you have to pay them ongoing fees, and you have a hard time getting access to your fiber that you put in place, and things happen later on. So it's just a lot of hair on the private right. So we lean towards public. And then there's always crossings and other things you have, whether it's a private landowner or a private easement you need to get, or dealing with some tribal lands, dealing with some of the different government agencies that we sometimes call private right-of-way as well. But so basically we focus on doing good, broad public right-of-way, and then more close the gaps with the private right-of-way when we need to.
So on average, and it's probably a real tough question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Start to finish, what's it take to get onto a right-of-way, public right-of-way?
And it's funny because when you talk about the overall length of an entire build, sometimes the right-of-way process is the longest period of time. And you can spend 6 to 12 months getting the right-of-way, and then it takes you 6 months to build them. So when you look at these long projects, really any of them, whether it's we do fiber to the tower projects, we're building 500 miles in the city within a 2-year period, or we're building 1,000 miles between Omaha and Kansas City in a couple-year period. The reason those projects take so long is there's always 1 or 2 areas where you can't get the right of way. Whether it's a private entity, but sometimes it's a public entity as well. A certain franchise agreement with one town or one location, one crossing, and it just really you hit a snafu there. So I would say 3 to 6 months in the normal case, but knowing on any given project you're going to have that 10% of your route that is basically hung in limbo, and can take you 12, 18, even 24 months to get it perfected.
Michael, slightly different setup for you. How do you work right away in NG?
The time frames are a lot like what Randy just mentioned. So we do have right-of-ways along railroad tracks where we've had to cross and go under railroad tracks. But we really try to stay in the public right-of-ways as well. So there's just a lot less you have to deal with in the long term when you stay in the public right-of-way versus getting in the private.
So Donna, a slightly different question. Joint builds. So it sounds like you're open to doing joint builds at TVA for certain parts of the network. How do you structure those?
Well, we've kind of evolved with the market. The majority of TVA systems is actually constructed with partner entities. They kind of, in some ways, I guess you could say, engaged us into the fiber business. So we find our partnerships to be very successful. Like I said, it's very strategic. Finding what your A to Z point will be, we can pick. We have over 16,000 transmission lines for our service territory. So we have several routes that we can choose from, as well as obviously the right-of-ways. It's not something we have to go out and perfect, so I feel like we can get to market sooner. But the key for us definitely is figuring out what facilities TVA is going to connect along the way, as well as, again, those drop points. From a financial standpoint, historically, the entity is reimbursed TVA all cost for that. But again, for that investment, you're getting fibers in return with no restrictions to use. You can use them for your own operations. You can assign them, lease them to other entities. Today, I think that our model has kind of evolved to more of a partnership opportunity. TVA has a vested interest in this asset as well, and so financially the burden isn't all 100% on that external party. There are some interest as well as economic development that we look at as making this more of a case study for this build opportunity.
Gotcha. So, in summary, on builds, very traditional way to go about constructing network. Time-wise, it takes some time, so certainly, and it's a capital-intensive process. No matter how creative you get, it still costs a bunch of money. But there's certainly different ways to approach it. I guess the next topic that we have is swaps. So I love the idea of a swap, right? Overnight, you get 100 miles worth of network, and everybody sits around, does a little bit of horse trading, and you say, come out with some new network. One of the challenges that we've seen from our position in the world is how do you value the asset that you're giving up and the asset that you give? That's first challenge number one, right? So I sit down and I say my stuff's worth $100 a mile, and I say, okay, your stuff's worth 50. Now the person on the other side of the table, so why is mine worth 50 if yours is worth 100? So I guess what structure, what approach have you taken? And Ray, I'll start with you. I got you first, but what structure have you taken in order to start to get some of those swaps going?
We take a pretty conservative view internally from an accounting perspective with our accountants and our auditors, because back in the glory days, there were some people who got themselves into some trouble being a little too aggressive with those.
Getting out of jail now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we tend to be very conservative and really look at the market value. We do a lot of, almost like real estate, we do a lot of comparables. So we have to go and demonstrate internally to our accounting department first, just to say, here's how we're valuing this. And I think then that flows through to your discussion with your partner of, what is the value of the assets on each side. So it's easy when you're both exchanging like for like in similar geographies and similar locations. It's, okay, 30 miles of mine, 30 miles of yours, but it's less about the mileage and more about the value. So if one is in, we have a lot of them where either we're getting a counter from someone and giving them a lot more mileage, on a short distance and giving them a lot more mileage of fiber on a big route, or things along those lines. So it's just a good, we always try to have open conversations with our partners, with the folks we're doing exchanges with. We don't even like to say swap, we try to say exchange.
No, exchange.
I catch myself saying it too.
Yeah.
But, so it's just having a good conversation, because both are mutually, it's mutually beneficial for both parties. So find out the way to make sure both are happy and comfortable is the only way to work.
And so Zayo is open for exchanges.
Absolutely. We're all about cost effective. So we build a lot of network everything. So Zayo is this company that builds, but we spend a lot of time looking at how we can avoid building first and figure out how we can partner with other folks. And there's a great synergy, we think, in a lot of different situations. That some people at first blush think we're competing or we don't want to do things, but we absolutely work with everyone across the board on any mutually beneficial arrangement.
Michael, we'll throw the same question to you.
Well, it's really an interesting process to sit in on. You can exchange waves for fiber. You can exchange fiber for fiber. So, valuing what you're giving and what you're getting really becomes a challenge. And I don't know of a mathematical equation that you can set out for every instance that you're looking at. If somebody finds value in a wave and you need to close a loop, and you can equate that to an accounting principle that matches, then that may be the way that you work it out. But I haven't really found one scenario that works in all practices for this kind of process.
So, Don, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I like to keep that off balance. So, as a partner, I look at it and I say, okay, I want to do a swap, or exchange. And the power company is not in the telecommunications business, right? So does that further complicate things? Because as you sit down and say, well, you're not really in our business, but you're somewhat in our business, I guess, how do you normalize that?
So we have relationships from large carriers down to a local power company that may be providing these services. TVA has done several exchanges. Thanks for the new term. And kind of marrying it to this very subjective that for TVA in our process really is what is the benefit that TVA is getting back? Is there a power facility that we currently don't have fiber connectivity to that we're getting fiber from someone else? That is invaluable to us in many cases. So again, I know I'm not really answering your question. I'm kind of piggybacking off of them. At the end of the day, it's very subjective for TVA. And in some cases, we have swapped assets where the external party is taking immediate use of the fiber that we're providing to them. However, TVA is not using the asset we're getting in exchange, whether it be a wave fiber or any other connectivity. But we look at it as equal. In some cases, we swapped fiber. ADS has fiber for optical ground wire fiber. For my internal analysis, we just kind of value them at the same price. It's just a subjective build. I think it can be more complicated just because TVA is looking at it from a power system operations, not how much money are we going to make on a return on the asset we're getting from someone in exchange. But for TVA, it's what is the operational benefit and that internal value that we assign to that exchange asset that we're receiving.
Absolutely. I guess, Randy, you've done exchanges in a number of different markets, different places, different partners. Do you have some best practices that you follow? As you get into a situation where you say, hey, we're going to sit down, we're going to look at exchanging some network, what's the best practices?
We try to make sure we clearly document everything up front while we're going through the conversation initially. I think that just makes sense. People tend to move around a lot in telecom and rotate companies, so we feel two parties have an intent at ground zero. Make sure that's really well documented. There's good reciprocal agreements that outline it. And I wish we could be really smart and came up with this on our own, but we just learned it the hard way. We've acquired a lot of companies. We did a lot of different exchanges and swaps with other companies, and then trying to sort through it and read it. Like, what did they mean by this? And then you ask the other party, like, I don't know either. We bought them out of bankruptcy, so we don't know what they meant. So you're trying to sort through it. So I think that's the most important thing, is to be really clear and precise on how it's structured, how it's set up, and then we typically will do separate, like when we talk about doing an IRU, ultimately we're IRUing fiber to them and they're IRUing their fiber to us. Have two separate agreements. They're reciprocal, you just swap the names around, and then it makes your negotiation fairly easy, because you're demanding on one side, you're going to basically get back on the other side, so it helps you to really work through. It's amazing how quickly those go with the lawyers, because whatever you say yes to over here or no to, you're going to sign up for us on the other side.
So really most of and it sounds like that's consistent across the board, most of the agreements for exchanges are done as reciprocal IRU agreements. So it's usually based in an IRU format and not a title sale or...
I think it depends on the asset. So when we're dealing with conduit, we typically will try to do that as an asset exchange. We're building 1,000 miles from Omaha to KC. To have 30 miles in the middle that we IRU and we own the rest doesn't always make the most sense. So from that perspective, but when it's fiber, I'm the opposite on fiber. I think it's kind of silly to have, for me to have title to two fibers on a sheet he owns and he operates. Like, what am I going to do with those two fibers inside of his sheet? It feels good, to say I have title to it, but from an operation perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Gotcha. And that's consistent with what you guys see as well. As far as, and this may not be a question qualified to answer, but accounting. Is there so I guess what I'm taking from this discussion here is that you do some kind of fair market analysis to say this is the valuation of the assets, and then once you go ahead and paper that deal, then that's kind of how you place the value on it from an accounting perspective. So before I move on to our next topic, any questions on exchanges from the live group? So.
What are the tax ramifications on these exchanges? Consult your tax advisor.
But that doesn't stop me from espousing all of my opinions. I mean, because you treat it like each independent IRU, you have a purchase, or an IRU on one side when you're buying, and so you treat that the same way you would if you just sold it to them for cash. And then on the flip side, you're acquiring an asset, and so you're paying them cash for it. Now, the cash may or may not exchange hands. We've had some entities where we actually do exchange cash. Okay, we're going to send you an invoice, you're going to write us a check. We're going to send you an invoice, you're going to write us a check. Part of that, sometimes when you do that fair market value, there's a discrepancy. So one party is buying more than the other, and so there is a need to have cash change hands. But so I would just treat it like you would any other normal transaction if you were to go out and buy it for cash or sell it for cash. So from an accounting perspective, we always use what I call the deferred revenue perspective. So if we do an IRU on an asset from someone and they give us $1 million up front, we will amortize that revenue recognition over the term of the IRU.
You got a second life as a tax accountant.
Like I said, Zayo is very financially focused. I've learned much more I've had like one accounting class in my life, but learned more than my fair share of accounting, finance, tax, bankruptcy laws.
Yeah, right, exactly. So moving on to our last method of network expansion, which is acquisition in a network. And to me, that comes in a couple of different flavors. The first flavor may be, going concern. You're going to go out and you're going to buy a company that has customers and revenue and all this great stuff, and you're going to try to integrate that back into your business. The other way is which I'm not allowed to say distressed anymore, so let's call it a non-strategic asset that is out there that may be fallow right now, it's not being utilized. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about, apologize for that, but the idea of integrating a going concern. I mean, what are some of the things that you look at as Zayo as you've acquired a number of different fiber companies?
I think when you're acquiring an entire company, our primary valuation, I think most people's primary valuation is really based on the revenue stream. How much revenue is on there today is your primary way to determine the value of the company. If you're just acquiring assets and not buying the entire company, then I think it's much more about what is the value of those assets. It's more about what is the revenue you can get from those assets going forward. I mean, and obviously when you're buying a company, you want to know what you can get going forward. But usually the big part is what is it worth today from existing revenue. So you need to look at the assets. And again, you look at them. I've seen lots of maps from companies, and they got lines all over the place, and you get excited. Wow, that looks really interesting. I would love to have fiber here, here, and here. And then you start peeling it back a little bit, and you realize they have 2 fibers, 4 fibers, 6 fibers. Our core business is to sell fiber. So I always joke, most companies we deal with, and that's why I think we work well with some of the companies, is they want to build network or get new network to light it, to provide capacity to their customers, to their subscribers. We want to build network or obtain network so we can sell it to everyone else, so they can light it to reach their consumers. So for us, it's typically looking at what is the number of fibers available, age of the fibers that are on there, and then the big question, the big thing I think people need to be cautious about is what are the underlying rights there? How is it perfected? What are you buying? Because the time frame might expire, it's a railroad right away or other private easements, pole attachment agreements, what are the ongoing fees for those poles? And we have acquired companies where we found out later, courtesy of an audit by the utility company, they said, oh, by the way, you're on 100 poles here that we have no record of you ever applying for it, and we don't have a record either because it was installed by a prior company.
Yeah, it gets very interesting when you're talking about the non-strategic assets. The assets have been out there for a while. And, just as an example, we had a company that approached us and said, hey, we want you to sell this conduit system in a certain city. We looked at that same thing, got excited, and said, wow, there's lots of buyers for this. This is great. We started to dig a little bit deeper and found out that they had no access to manholes. And people that they had actually got on the right of way with, they got in a big fight with, and they won't allow them back on the right of way. So you basically have a conduit system you cannot access.
They forgot to put in writing all the details of that agreement.
Correct.
When they were both liking each other.
Correct. And so one of the things that we've seen is that it's very important to do a lot of due diligence on the non-strategic assets because there tends to be a little bit of hair on the dog there that you have to be careful. Michael, you and I were chatting last night a bit about, and we've been sticking to more of a fiber-based theme. And one of the things that's come up a lot more in our business is more of a hybrid network. So utilizing other technologies to extend network. And so one of the things we're talking about was an acquisition that NGN made that does a little bit of that hybrid.
Yeah, that's true. We had the opportunity to buy a small wireless WISP that was in our region, and so we did that. We believe that in our market that we're trying to serve, that it's going to take a blended solution. We're not going to be able to build fiber to every subscriber that wants it, so we're looking at a blended solution where we can find distribution points for that wireless network that we can connect even a higher percentage of people than we'd be able to do with fiber. So it was a good opportunity for us. We saw that we evaluated the market that we could reach, the life of the asset that was still there, and we decided it was a good opportunity, so we took it.
Yeah, fantastic. Randy, at this point, Zayo, no plans for using wireless to extend network?
I would say no. I mean, there's always exceptions to everything, but given the markets that we serve, we're not trying to reach consumers or small enterprise, things like that. We're really focused on that bandwidth infrastructure component. So typically, we need much higher capacity, much higher resiliency on some of those routes. So that's probably the main reason. We're not fundamentally opposed to wireless technology. Some of our biggest customers are in the mobile business, and there's definitely lots of growth and the technology advances on whether it's mobile technology, wireless point-to-point, all kinds of stuff. So we more view it as we enable it, but we don't necessarily use it to distribute our own specific traffic.
I guess before we get to the final question here, any topics that you guys want to cover before we jump to the final question? Anything else that we missed?
I stole the mic. You guys are learning the hard way. My wife and daughters will be saying, "Oh yeah, we knew that was going to happen." You talked about, you mentioned the term joint build before.
Yeah.
And so the one thing that we kind of learned, having done so many different partnerships and projects with folks, is we actually avoid joint builds. And I say that people, we don't do joint builds. Like, what do you mean you don't do joint builds? And I think, again, going back to the traditional definition of a joint build is where each party owns their own assets, and they each have to go and get their own franchise agreements, their own permits, and a lot of those things. And we feel it creates a lot of incremental cost and overhead that you're just paying out to various governmental entities and agencies. So we try to come up with a structure that gives everyone the same end benefit of we each have assets and we each have long-term control and ownership and access to the manuals to reach your assets, but without having to go through some of the rigmarole that comes with the joint build. So that's just something to think about is, how do you reach that end objective without calling it a joint build?
Correct, because it's always an intersection of cost-effective but practical, right? And so sometimes, you see the joint build. Good news is you've got money and somebody to share the cost. Sometimes bad news is someone might have a slightly different agenda than you do on some of those things, and then you've got like government permits and different things as well.
Can you repeat the question?
Typically. And that's the other thing is a lot of...
Repeat the question, please.
Sorry. He was asking if you do a project with a company but don't do a traditional joint build, how does that work? What's the structure of that? And so, that's the other thing is many people look at a joint build or some type of partnership or a swap as a way to reduce their capital. And frankly, as Zayo, I've never been told to reduce my capital. I'm more focused on increasing my revenue. So from us, and that's why, again, it often works really well, is we will come up with a structure that gives everyone at the end of it that they feel that they've got, it's their asset, they've got full control over it for the life of the asset. And how do you do that, whether it's an IRU with indefinite renewable terms or it's a title sale or things like that, that you can structure it. So Zayo will typically take on all the capital, pay all those bills directly, and then the other partners will reimburse Zayo through whether it's an IRU, title, lots of different models that work.
Actually, you pretty much summarized what I was going to say. I think one thing that I have learned on this panel definitely is terminology. Swaps. We don't use swaps the way we used to anymore. Joint builds. For TVA, definitely joint builds meant that you had interest in a route that we had and we were going to build it together, but it was going to be done by TVA. TVA has the crews are going to do it, we're going to own it, we're going to install it, we're going to IRU the fibers back to you. So I think for me, understanding that joint build is no longer an appropriate term to use. But the end result of if you have a route, TVA does not have it, but we have transmission lines you want to build, we're going to structure that deal where TVA is going to build it, own it, and then lease fibers back to you for an investment, whether it's through an IRU or however we structure that. So I appreciate that clarification of new industry terms. Partnerships, there you go.
Gotcha, guys. So last question here. Congratulations, you've all been promoted. You're now CEO of a brand new fiber-based company. You have no network in the ground, you've got plenty of money, and you've got a reasonable amount of time to build a network. Randy's getting stuck with the mic. You can do anything you want. What is the method that you're going to approach based on the three things that we talked about today and all the subtopics? How are you going to build your network? What's your preference?
You're going to build where it makes sense, and you're going to buy where it makes sense. I think that I think the new market is it's just that. I think it's a collaboration of efforts across resources rather than a just let me own it all. So, you know, we built close to Atlanta. We bought the rest of the way. Just the cost benefit to us of building where they already had network didn't make sense. So I think that really we're just looking at a collaborative effort now amongst regions. We're getting a bunch of strong regional networks now that have high quality equipment, high quality fiber, and so I think that we're realizing that we can accomplish a lot more as a group now than we could as individuals, and so I see that's where the market's going, and I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that.
I think, and again, I'm going to take it back to a TVA perspective of what I've been involved with. TVA sells power to 155 power distributors throughout our territory. We're a very rural region as well, and there's a lot of conversations being housed right now of how do we build an interconnecting network that connects power system operations as well as bringing rural broadband, community enhancements to the areas. So I think if I had a company that was going out and trying to build this infrastructure, it's really leveraging those relationships and interest. And again, mimicking what you said, what's the existing infrastructure? How can we take advantage of things? But making sure it's built as an interconnected system that brings, benefits to more than just one or two needs.
And I think Michael hit it right on the head. Build where you need to, but avoid building wherever you can. One of my favorite little stories is my first boss out of college, an OSP engineer. He had been worked in the field for a long time, smoked way too much. And he'd pull up once he's teaching me how to stick poles and do field surveys, pull up to a gas station, he's like, you need to run in and get me a pack of cigarettes. And I said, I don't know what brand you smoke. And he said, when you smoke as much as I do, you smoke a brand called whatever's cheapest. So it's kind of the same thing. What is the cheapest way to go and get this network built? So leverage existing assets wherever you can. And it varies because there's some sections when we're doing a fiber to the tower project, and we have a major one going on in Atlanta right now. We're building fiber in lots of places, but we have a core network that needs to be really high fiber count. When we get out further to the edges, we don't need to own all that assets. We only need 2, 4, 8 fibers. So how can we figure out and leverage, folks who already have assets there? Our big focus is we feel there was already an oversupply in the telecom industry that hurt a lot of us in many ways. So we don't want to replicate that. We want to go and just overbuild people and have 3, 4, 5 people building fiber in the exact same location.
Yeah, we've seen, just in terms of sharing information, which is basically what we talked about. You're in a different situation with a power company and some protected assets. But, we started 10 years ago. No one wanted to share their map. They want to show you where their network was because it's mine. And I don't want anybody to know where that is because somebody may build right on top of it. Where today, it's let's lay out what we got, what do you got, let's figure it out, and it's a much different, I think you guys are both right on the mark with the idea being that, I think collaboration is more the order of the day. Before we get to question and answer, a quick housekeeping item. There is a big party tonight up on the mezzanine level, 5 to 8, sponsored by Google Fiber, so everybody be sure to attend. So with that, questions? Anybody have questions?
Well, we're just getting started building fiber in our location, and we've just heard all kinds of things about the poles, going aerial and getting rights to the poles and the make-ready and the costs. And I'm getting the sense that the people, the companies already on the poles would rather not have us on. But what is your actual experience? I think what they're trying to do is like kind of scare us off right at the beginning by sending people in who say, well, you know, it's going to be 2 years, you know, even though it says 90 days, but, you know, we're going to find some stuff that you do wrong, we're going to extend it, we're going to, like, what in the real world, what do you find your experiences with building on poles?
Exactly that. Double it. It's evaluating it. So you know, when you talk about the costs for aerial, you know, the biggest benefit is you can do it faster and do it cheaper. But with the amount of costs involved with make ready, the amount of time involved with make ready, it's starting to become less appealing. So you're paying more for aerial in some sections than you can potentially plow and definitely, you know, bore. So it's really looking at that location. Anytime I can put network underground, I do. You know, that's always my preference. But you need to look at each location and say, well, is there a viable underground route? Is it all, you know, is it the Appalachian Mountains where you're building? So poles might be pretty attractive versus rock trenching, you know, through areas, or and then you also have ongoing fees. So that would really qualify as the private right-of-way. So if you're in a public right-of-way and you bury it in the ground, you don't have the ongoing cost. You're paying a pole attachment fee every month or every year. For that pole, it's going to add on to your ongoing operating costs. So there's just lots of trade-offs you need to look at. And I think you need to go out and have someone look at the poles and decide what, you know, is it really a nightmare in that area? Are there 3 or 4, you know, telecom companies, cable companies already on there, or is it pretty clean and open? And that's probably the real driver.
What percentage do you guys use aerial versus underground?
Percentage of area.
Percentage of aerial versus underground.
I would say, I don't know what exact number, on the long haul networks, it's 100%. On the metro network, it's fiber to tower, and even building something for a company who does wireless. You're building something for a mobile company who does wireless. They're not so concerned if their fiber's in the air because their whole cell tower's in the air. You know, they rely a lot on things going through the, you know, that's above ground. So when we get into those fiber to tower projects, it's really the cost effective thing. So we will use aerial wherever it's cost effective. I would say, you know, it's probably less than 50% aerial in a metro project, maybe 30%, but on the long haul routes that are core backbone, we try to make sure that they're 100% underground.
Because we were friendly with the electric co-ops, we're 95% aerial and 5% underground. That 5% deals with places where we did run into poles that just weren't friendly toward us. So, you know, and the question is, are you going to have to bore or are you going to have to plow too? Because if you're going to have to bore, there your costs may drive you to say, I need to look a little harder at these poles, versus if you can just plow in the right of way, the public right of way, go with it. But having somebody who knows what they're looking for on poles is definitely a valuable asset when you're in that stage.
I don't have a lot to add to that because TVA we use our own transmission towers, our high voltage. It's not a distribution system, but definitely I will, you know, follow along with the better relationship you can have with that local power company regarding what you're doing or coming in at the upfront to see if there's any pairing of relationship. They may not have a fiber optic system that they're interested in deploying for their own, you know, power system operations. I think there's opportunity to leverage that relationship to help them get a fiber infrastructure that they otherwise may not have installed because it's cost prohibitive or whatever. So I think the strategy with that relationship is kind of, in some cases, key. At the end of the day, if there's 2 or 3 other attachments to the pole, they've already kind of have a perception of that relationship. But I would encourage you to definitely reach out to that power company early on and tell them your plans and see if there's a way for you to partner with them for mutual benefit.
So here's a question from the audience that we'll be waiting, guys. There's always a debate on what's safer, underground or aerial, right? And so I guess as you look at, we have one power poles, but you know, in terms of outages and things that you see, is it more aerial? Is it more underground? What's a safer bet?
Well, this gets down to some opinion and some facts. You know, we got a lot of areas, but we do a lot of repair in the right-of-ways too, where somebody's dug, even though we have it marked. You know, we had somebody plowing the right-of-way with the grader the other day, knocked our boxes out of the ground, dug the fiber up. You know, we had to go to the protect path on that. But no matter which route you go, you want to have a protect path on it, I guess, is a significant piece of advice there. But we find that the ADSS is really strong. You know, we'll see the three-phase power tore down on the pole and the tree resting on the ADSS, and take the tree down, and the fiber sustains it. So yeah, there's a lot of strength in that kind of fiber.
I think it's one of those statistically, I haven't seen anything that tells you one way or the other. And we do have a significant amount of aerial existing. You know, we acquired FTS from First Energy, so we have huge amounts of fiber on power poles throughout the Northeast, some further out west. We work with utility companies. So I would say the verdict's up in the air, but there's definitely perception from people, mainly our customers, that underground is better. We've had them explicitly tell us we will not buy this route from you because it's superior. We want it to be all underground. So we focus on that, instead of trying to convince them otherwise. You're just setting yourself up, because then they're going to get an outage on the aerial, and then they're going to blame you. So so rather than trying to fight that uphill battle, we just try to put it underground. But it's just different outages. Squirrels, gunshots, drunk drivers hitting phone poles, versus someone with a grader who hits it. One might be hard, it often can be faster to repair an aerial outage, because you can identify, you can get out there pretty quickly. When it's underground, you may not be able to identify exactly where it is. You have to get into the OTDR shots to locate it. So there's just trade-offs on both sides of how it works. And it's probably, a coin toss if you sat down and really did a detailed statistical analysis. But the biggest hurdle is the psychology of people. They feel it's safer and more secure underground.
It's the politics of religion.
Yeah, a joke we have locally, we're rural Georgia. So you talk about weather and the effects on fiber and other things, and you have hurricane season, you have tornadoes, and then you have dove season. These guys love to shoot the doves off the fiber when they're sitting there. So that is, we just joke about that a little bit.
I've got to talk about my OPGW. I so should be working for the manufacturer to sell this product. So optical ground wire, again, we're on the high voltage transmission line. So relocations, accidents, things, that's the advantage. And you're not going to run into a lot of that when you're on the high voltage transmission line. It's going to be quite costly for somebody to want us to move a 500 kV line that's, 20 miles long, 500 miles long. But I can tell you from the reliability of our OPGW system, it is regional. Lightning strikes, we can document that to kind of show you what is more likely to engage in a lightning strike. But for the most part, we have very few outages. And what we have documented over the last 10 years, we've had, our reliability is pretty much 5 nines, kind of like our power system. And the outages we have had were directly related to force majeure events. In 2010, Nashville had a great flood situation where the entire city flooded, not too different from what just happened over on the East Coast from Charleston, South Carolina. So we had some impact from that where structures were actually torn down because of the flooding. As well as 2 years later, there was a tornado system that came through the Alabama, Georgia area. An F5 tornado hit some of our infrastructure. It was one of the hardest infrastructure hits TVA had in our 75-year history. However, the optical ground wire did not have an alarm. It was mangled, twisted, thrown into the ground, and we have documentation as well as AFL was our manufacturer for that particular route, and they used it as a showcase. It did not have an outage until we actually cut it, but to see the visual of how that cable was mangled was so impressive. So I can appreciate a customer not wanting an aerial, but when I have statistics that show it took an F5 tornado, it's pretty impressive. So we have a pretty good reliability system with our aerial system, for our area at least.
Well, I want to thank you guys. It was great to have you on the panel, and appreciate everybody's time. Had a great show. Great afternoon.